Hello guys, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking to you about A Christmas Carol and Charles Dickens. However, I will not only be introducing you to Charles Dickens and one of his most renowned texts, but I will also do so by posing maybe more questions than answers. I know many of you will probably be studying this text for your essays this year, so I really hope that by the end of this video, you'll find a way to find answers within these texts and transform them into well-structured arguments in your essays. So let's start. So firstly, we're going to begin with Charles John Huffam Dickens, born in 1812 and died at the age of 58 in 1870. He was born in Portsmouth and unfortunately didn't have a most pleasant childhood. At the early age of 12, he had to leave school to work at a shoe blacking factory in London in order to support his family, whilst his father was in debtor's prison. By the time he reached his early 20s, though, he was already a recognisable author, acquiring literary success thanks to the Pickwick Papers, published across 1836. Dickens married Catherine Hogarth in the same year, and together they had 10 children before their divorce in 1858. Critics have had much to say about Dickens' parenting, calling him selfish, unaffectionate, and demanding. Dickens reckoned his children as failures and estranged them from their mother once they got their divorce in 1858. Knowing this, how do we read A Christmas Carol? A book that's trying to ground its readers in the founding pillars of such an institution as the family, yet written by a man who indulged in only the educational and formative aspects of his own household. A text that has been read as an allegory that, through the embodiment of the Christmas spirit, tries to rectify the social-political ignorance around poverty and a deteriorating working class in Victorian Britain, that, however, still allowed debtor prisons and child labour. Also worth noting is the fact that A Christmas Carol came to Dickens in a time of dire financial struggle. His previous and set to be his favourite work, Martin Chuzzlewit, a monthly serial published throughout 1843, was not successful and had left him not only disheartened, but temporarily penniless. Supposedly completed in just under 6 weeks, how does this rush and discomfort change the reading of the text, the creation of the text? For A Christmas Carol is a novella. It is one of the only more known Dickensian texts, per se, that happens to not be a novel. Having said this, would this narrative then work as a longer piece? Is his writing therefore more concise, descriptions more boiled down than the usual Dickensian literature? It is very important to know how to entwine the historical and biographical context you learn into a relevant argument in your essay. You don't want to be adding unnecessary blocks of text and knowledge in the middle of the body of your essay. Furthermore, a lot of works were published in monthly installments, as I have previously said. He pioneered the serial publication of narrative fiction. This form of publication became the dominant medium of readership during the Victorian era, and often he tended to modify events of the books based on the reaction received from his readers, chapter to chapter.
I appreciate it pretty well.
So if we move on to the Victorian era, this period is usually referred to as Victorian due to Queen Victoria's reign between 1837 and 1901. It saw a mass drift of the population towards the cities and urban centres. And as the end of the Industrial Revolution approached and Great Britain held onto its embers of colonial stardom, the country was considered a global economic superpower. Many of Dickens' characters are seen migrating to the bigger metropolis in search for wealth. Enjoy this, he shines a light on the exacerbated wealth gap that can, for example, be seen between the Cratchits and Scrooge. This period of time also saw a rise in workhouses and poor wages, and to the emergence of a now unfathomable idea that helping the poor would not help the poor, but instead help increase population and result in an exponential growth in general poverty overall. The Victorian era, however, saw a new class of readers emerge. Literacy was becoming more widespread, and regardless of the many working class illiterate groups, they found other ways to access this literature. They would meet up to pay and have an individual read out the latest monthly Dickensian episode for them. It's very, very important to take this into account when reading Dickensian fiction, as the novel's target audience had suddenly shifted from previous literature. It was no longer the elite or upper class. The book deals with poverty, child labor, not previously tackled to such extent in popular fiction. Consequently, it would not surprise a Victorian reader to encounter an impoverished and awfully exploited worker such as Bob Cratchit in the tale. Once again, if we were to look at his 1861 novel, Great Expectations, we are greeted by a tale surrounding a poor family. In this book, the orphan protagonist is taken in by a benefactor and bred for richness, but still gets to experience the class differences between the city and the countryside, and even within the distinct environments themselves. Although it's not necessary to include this in your essays and other projects, it's very important and probably quite helpful to have some knowledge of other Dickensian texts where similar themes are tackled or recurrent character tropes appear. Some themes to consider. Obviously, Christmas is, well, one of our main features to look at in this text. However, another facet of the Victorian period, and probably one of the main reasons the story became so popular, was the newly instated Christmas holiday. Christmas in Britain, as we know it today, only became popularized in the late 1800s. It was not only Dickens himself that influenced this holiday, but a few outsider factors. For example, turkey was not considered the Christmas roast dinner of choice at the beginning of the reign, yet gradually as more were imported from America, they ended filling British hearths during the festivities. Or the Christmas tree, where Prince Albert himself brought it in from his native Germany in 1840. Furthermore, mass production in factories led to toys and gifts becoming more accessible and affordable. Thus, the tradition of gifting them became widespread. To put it into words, A Christmas Carol came to be in a Britain that was still figuring out what the holiday was supposed to represent and encompass. Dickens' many tales about Christmas certainly helped the Christmas spirit come along. Another very key feature to look at is the supernatural aspect of this book. The three ghosts, the time traveling. The supernatural phenomenon in the Victorian era was accompanied by many advances in scientific theory and practice. Darwin's own On the Origin of Species was published in 1859 and was put under much scrutiny before being appraised. If we were to look into this element of Dickensian fiction, aside from taking into account the spectral appearances in A Christmas Carol, of course, it would perhaps be useful to read another of his texts, The Signalman, a short tale where he mixes the supernatural and the growing skepticism in Victorian society to create a brief but not any less eerie story. And then, I promise no spoilers here, although I expect many of you to have already heard of this story. So for the sake of this video, I am not going to include a summary. If we were to look at form and structure very briefly, one of Dickens' key devices is to use descriptions in order to reveal information about his characters. He also had a careful use of diction and semantics. So therefore, how does he help you understand what to expect from characters? Can you identify certain semantic fields that stick to a particular character? In Scrooge, for example, there's a lot of hints to fear and death. He's said to have his eyes red, his thin lips blue, invoking the image of a dead body, corpse. This concept of monstrosity that accompanies the character so early on does a lot to portray Scrooge as an inscrutable villain. He even presents Fred Scrooge in Fezziwig in order to make the reader see the existence of good businessmen, in order to contrast it with Scrooge, However, what does Dickens do for the writing by presenting Scrooge as such a solidified villain? However, in his first conversation with Jacob Marley's ghost, his old boss, Ebenezer and Marley share a brief dialogue on travelling and, well, ghostly existence, to which Scrooge answers by remarking on the ghost's speed. Do you travel fast? Why is Scrooge allowed to be funny here? If nothing in his character is satirized, then it is a reach to ask the reader to like him. Dickens must humanize Scrooge for a reader to be able to reflect upon the message of the text, and also to make the turnaround at the end even merely believable. Also, what kind of diction and register are we able to identify here? Dickens often shifts his use of vernaculars and colloquialisms depending on who is talking or who his character is talking to. Dialogue a lot of the time reveals the character's age, class, and education. I also invite you to think further. These two essays, although quite complex reads, provide alternative readings to A Christmas Carol. Eliot L. Gilbert's The Ceremony of Innocence, Charles Dickens, explores the theme of innocence and reflection, that is, of an adult looking back at their childhood self, whereas Edmund Wilson's Two Scrooges provides an argument of the problematic character of Scrooge, portraying it as only temporarily fixed within the time limitations of the story itself. I really hope this video has helped you and that the many notes in here have provided you with good information and knowledge for your essays. Thank you so much.